one of the greatest concerns, again, in a project-based learning environment is the management of an everyday classroom. And that's actually what we're going to focus on in this video, is what I'm referring to as just another day, what it looks like in the classroom. So management in the classroom becomes a major issue for many people. How the classroom looks different, how it runs differently, what actually does it look like if you're in the middle of a project. So let's go through some of those pieces. There are some everyday items, things that you're going to do just about every day, or you're going to direct your students to do every day. Those are pieces that, after guidance, after the first project, or even after a first couple days, the students get really used to and should be doing on their own. The first one is your know and need to know list. It's a living document, making sure that you're taking the time to either look at it with the students, or encouraging them to look at it to see what they have and have not accomplished. Not only that, but if there's anything that they need to add to the need to know as they're going further into the project. So really the question becomes, is it something that you now know that you didn't before, or is there new questions that have come up? Because it's a living document, it's something that you need to be comfortable going through and checking every day as well, so that we can make it the best learning environment for our students, and so that we can get the questions answered, especially when we're talking about content questions, not necessarily just project questions, but content questions. Students are going to ask them during the class time too, but this really gives them an opportunity and a location in which they can feel comfortable asking those questions. Daily use of rubrics is another one. Those rubrics are there for a reason, and students really need to be trained that they should be always using their rubric. One of the questions that I always ask students every single time they ask me a question is, have you looked at the rubric? I feel like a broken record. They feel like I'm continually saying the same thing over and over. I kind of am. There's a reason for it. I really want them to make sure that they look at the rubric. My rubrics really are very, very, very intense and very much, I guess we should say, complete, I guess the best word to use. I try to make them as complete as possible so that if they have questions, they can actually go to the rubric and look at it to make sure that they understand what is required of them. It's not about does it answer the content questions. That's my job, and it's their job. But what it is doing is giving them the full picture of what they need to accomplish and what they should be able to demonstrate at the end. The driving question is another piece that's going to be addressed every single day, because it is the part that's driving the entire project. This is why we spend time writing that driving question. That driving question becomes an important piece when we're looking at how the management of the class is. So when we're looking at that day-to-day, everyday item of the driving question, we want to make sure that it is posted either in the room, on your website, that you're mentioning it, that the kids know what it is, and that it's something that's an ongoing, regular part of your classroom. If you've watched the video that talks about project walls, then you've seen this image before. This is a project wall. This is an everyday item as well. Having that location for students to be able to go to and access all of these items is becoming important for the students, and so that they have an idea of what they can do without needing to go to the teacher. What kind of stuff can they access without having to ask for it? This gives them empowerment and allows for you to release control. It allows for them to take ownership of the classroom, and it actually allows for you to spend more time working with students on comprehension and less on classroom management. Okay, so just another day in the PBL classroom. What does that look like? That's one of the big questions. What does the classroom look like when you're in the middle of a project? Well, it can look very, very different. So there's some pieces to make sure that we take a look at here. So let's start out talking about workshops and how workshops work. Now, workshops are a little bit different than teaching traditionally. It is an option. Not everyone that runs a PBL classroom does indeed do workshops. I do. I know many teachers who do, because it allows for me to work with students in smaller groups, and it also allows me to give time for students to work on other things while I'm working with a small group. So I try to make my workshops working with anywhere from 4 to 8 students, depending on the length of the topic that we're talking about. And oftentimes it is something that I can do in about 10 to 15 minutes, no more. It really cuts my time and how long I go through and do a quote-unquote lecture, but it does give me that piece of information um, gives the students, the piece of information that I need to pass on to them. It's a very, for me, it's a very lucrative scaffolding technique because I am able to gauge from looking at the students and having that small group interaction, whether or not they fully understand the topic. The other piece that comes into play with working with small groups is that I'm able to take and force, force is the best word, students to engage within a classroom. When you're talking about working with, say 30 kids in a classroom and lecturing, those students don't engage. There's some that do, there's a few that do, there's a few who don't, and then there's those that are kind of halfway in between. When you work with 4 to 8 students, you can require that they are engaged in a much more effective manner. You have to you can make eye contact with each one of them. You can have a direct question and answer session without having to worry about gauging everybody else. You can gauge just those 8 students if you're working with a max of 8, and it allows for you to be able to impart content in a different manner. So while you're working with one group, all the other groups or the other teams are all sitting and working on their projects. They never don't have something to do. Oftentimes there's also activities that back up what you're doing within the classroom. And sometimes it's necessary to make sure that they have that activity if you know you're going to be doing an intensive workshop, because you need them to be focused and not be a distraction. It takes training. They do need to see what it looks like, you do need to model what the behavior is, and you do need to teach them how to behave within the classroom. But when they're working in this workshop model, you have one group that you are working with individually, and all the other groups are working on their own pieces of their project or activities that they're required to do. This frees up your time and their time, allowing them to have more flexibility in the classroom. In another video, we talked a little bit about creating task lists and going through and on that either contract or in a task list, creating what it is that those students, each in the member of the team, are going to have to accomplish. Now, that task list is something that's going to be addressed in the classroom by the teams, not necessarily by the teachers. The task list is, again, something that you can give ownership to those students in determining what they need to accomplish during class and outside of class. This task list is something that you're going to want to make sure that you teach within the classroom as part of an everyday piece of a project-based learning classroom. Teaching the students how to self-monitor and team monitor their actions and their accomplishments. Now, one of the ways that you can do that is looking at that reflection piece. Reflection becomes an important piece, not only just reflection, but keeping track of what they have done during the day. So on this project wall, which we're going to go into again, when it pops up here, on this project wall, I want to draw your attention this time to something that looks a little bit different. So we've looked at contracts in another video. Here what I want to look at is a project work log. This allows for us to be able to keep track of what the students have done and where they're going as their next steps. So I started doing this as, rather than doing it as a journal entry, which is what I used to do on paper, I did go through and I have made it into a very simple Google form that I can keep track of in a spreadsheet. And it actually helps me because I can see first who's actually doing the form. That's part of it. It is a good formative assessment for me, for them to be able to show me what they're doing, and then in addition also being able to have them manage and go through time management skills as well. So this is actually a really great tool to be able to use in assessing some of those 21st century skills. So in this case, the work log is going to have very simple pieces of information. Obviously, name, their class period that they're in, and then I have some questions that I ask them. And there's a few things that I have changed depending on the project that we're working on. It says, what did you personally do today for your group project? And what did you do as a group today for your project? And then if you could change one thing about your work today, it would be, and then I train them that nothing is not an answer. Nothing doesn't work here. I wouldn't change anything, doesn't work here, because I want them to really be reflective on what either went well or didn't go well and what they do indeed want to change. The other piece that I put on there is what homework do you need to do for your project. So that doesn't mean what homework have I assigned, but what do you need to do outside of the classroom for this project to have it completed. Now, once they've submitted this, then I'm able to have it as a recording, and I can see when they did this, and I can also see if they're absent, that they can go back and redo, a new one. So this work log allows for me to be able to keep track, and for them to be able to keep track of what they actually do in the classroom. This reflection of what they did in that work log allows for them to be able to monitor themselves and monitor each other as well. I like to use this as a tool because I actually go around and use this as a tool during a day that's just a work day, and I will actually go around and talk to them about where they're at individually on their project as well as how things are going in their group. So I continually do check-ins with the groups as a facilitator to make sure that they're on task and in the right direction to be able to accomplish what they need to accomplish. The other piece that is going to be an important piece for students in the project-based learning classroom is to have access to resources. Now, resources, again, look different in every classroom. So one of the things that we make sure that we understand is that we do supply resources for those students, extra resources, things that you're not going to give them, and in addition, any materials that you feel that you have shared, for example, like workshop, if you did anything with a PowerPoint or a presentation or a video, you can put all of those onto and share those resources with your student. And again, let's see, I am going to click on this one more time. I think it's already up, so we'll use this one. Go to my resources list, and even on this mock-up, I did come up with some resources. One of the resources that I put on here was our entry document because it was a good intro piece, and then a couple different articles that are good for them to be able to look at when we're talking about leadership, which is what this board was about. Now, if you're looking at resources and you want to see something that looks a little bit different, and you probably have seen it in my other one talking about project walls, you can have resources in packets, you can have resources on a website, you can have resources that are emailed to them, you could use Google Classroom. There's lots of different ways to give students resources, and any resources that they happen to find that are outside of your realm are great. And in fact, I highly suggest taking whatever resources they have found that are great and adding them to your resource list so that other students can access them and benefit from them. This resource list is another great tool that you can use to help students facilitate their learning. In addition, it's a great way to hook up with your library media specialists and allow for them to help you find things for students to be able to use to create a project. Okay, so this is just another little piece in management. There are more, but this is kind of where we're stopped with this video.